Miigwech, I didn't think I'd ever say this again, but can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, I never thought I'd utter those words again after virtual learning, but here we are. So first of all, thank you very much to the Nishnawbe Aski Nation for inviting me to come here and present to you this afternoon on project-based learning and the connections that I've been able to make on Indigenous knowledge. I recently finished my post-baccalaureate diploma in education, and through that and various practices, I've been able to make those connections. I see that my slides are up already here. I don't have control of them. So if we can go to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you very much. This is what I do here at Children of the Earth High School. Everything starts with the land. It is so important. The land gives us absolutely so much. Mother Earth, Creator. And that is how we frame our education in our grade 10 cohort. And then we are also moving to this school-wide starting in the fall. Next slide, please. So I don't know, did everyone get a copy of this document?
No, they haven't received the document.
Okay, so I hope everyone can see this up on the screen. We're going to do a little 5-minute think, pair, share kind of activity. This is something that we have done in our classroom to get our students into project-based / inquiry-based, especially for our curriculums. So what I want you to do is to take a look at this image the best way you can. If you already know what this image is, please play along. But I would like you to answer those 3 questions that you see on the screen. What do you notice? What do you wonder? And what questions do you have? And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. If you want to jot them down on a piece of paper, you can go right ahead. And I'll start my timer now. Should have some Jeopardy music going on in the background. Okay, we're at the half-minute mark for this activity.
Bonjour, Michelle. So you could hear and see what is going on. I'll be your eyes over here. We have
Awesome.
we have some very good observations being made by these ladies at the front. They're
Okay.
observing, and then our Abamatung gentlemen in the middle are writing. Oh,
Beautiful. One minute left. Okay, as we get down to the last 15 seconds, I'm going to ask for you to wrap up your thoughts, jot down any final observations. And if anyone would like to share, don't jump up all at once, um, would like to share, I would love to hear someone share their findings with them, what they noticed, what did they wonder, and what questions do you have before we move to the next slide?
oh, we got a sharing is caring back here.
Okay.
Give me a moment.
Okay, I noticed it resembles the North American ledger art. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I noticed.
Beautiful.
Oh, what do I wonder? Okay, well, I wonder if it's telling a story. And then I thought about an apartment building. And I just wondered if those were arrows.
Okay.
Maybe some type of technology. Yeah.
Me, Gwatch. We have another person?
Sure.
For question one, I see like something like hieroglyphics. And the question I had was it done by a child? And then the second, on the one side, the left side, it looked like there's a message there.
Okay. Beautiful.
Anyone else? Oh, they're cute. I thought that was a Nightmare Before Christmas at the top in Edward Scissorfingers. And I wondered why that boat was shooting at that goose. And then I thought I seen real old Mishipashu sideways, but I think it was this.
So this is a document. If the lovely person in control could go to the next slide. This is the treaty, the only Indigenous representation known of the Treaty 4 process drawn by Chief Pasqua. I found this document in my research phase as my teaching partner Tyler and I were trying to plan for our geography unit. Natural resources is one of the units in the grade 10 Manitoba curriculum. And we wholeheartedly believe that in order for students to understand how natural resource extraction has greatly affected Indigenous communities and land, you have to understand the treaty process. And so I found this document, and we did exactly what we did here today with our students. There is like underneath the person in the canoe is an arm and it's waving, and a student thought it was a hockey stick. So just like probably everybody, they had a lot of wonderings of what these pictures represent, and it is of the Treaty 4 process. Now, we had them compare this document to actual Treaty 4 translation, because our students, when I gave them a copy of the original document, they're like, Michelle, this is like old timey. I can't read it. And so we had the translated version for them. We still don't know the exact translation of this document, because even Chief Pasqua's family and the community that they're from are still presently working on it. So this representation was supposed to, from my understanding of the research that I've done, was supposed to go to Queen Victoria, but it ended up in a museum somewhere in the UK, as a lot of things have. And in 2007, Chief Pasqua's family and the community bought it. It went into, I believe, the Regina, a museum in Regina, and it was able to be on display. And apparently the family is still trying to translate this document because there is a process. They've had to go on into ceremony and sweat 4 times. They've had to sit with elders, and they've had to give offerings. So when we gave this to our students, it was the most engaging lesson that we have had with our students in the last 2 years. We had our students last year as well in grade 9, and they're back with us in grade 10. They had so many fabulous questions and wondering, and we just had the best class. And then after this, they were so incredibly engaged in every single lesson that we gave to them. Okay, we can move on to that next slide there. So before we start, I just want to recognize the lands where I am from and where everyone is gathering there in Thunder Bay. So I recognize I'm on the stolen lands of the Nishnawbe, Anisinu, Dakota, Oyate, Denisilene, Inaniwak, and the Nehiyatawak, and the homelands of my people, the Red River Métis. And I also recognize that Manitoba is also on the ancestral lands of the Inuit. I would also like to recognize the lands where all of you are gathered today, the land that is the Robinson Superior Treaty, and your nation is located in the James Bay Treaty 9 and the Ontario part of Treaty 5, and home of the Anishinaabe Nation, traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Anisinu, and the Algonquin people. And thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. So just a little bit about Children of the Earth High School. We are located in the heart of the north end of Winnipeg. It is one of the 2 geographically poorest communities in this city. It is my community. I have lived here since I was 2 years old, and I've gone to school in the area, and I am really thankful that I get to work in this community that has given me so much. We opened in 1991 as Aboriginal High School, and then Children of the Earth was submitted by a student and adopted as our name, and we've been going strong ever since. We have a focus on cultural practices. We smudge daily. We have pipe ceremonies. There's teachings. We have feasts. We go sage picking, and we have language instruction in Cree and Ojibwe. And this school was built by incredible community members who said, you know, we have residential schools at the time. We need a place where Indigenous kids can go and freely practice their ways of life while getting a Western education. And so here we are. This is who we are. And it's been an amazing, I've been with this school for 7 years. This is my first permanent teaching job, and I can't believe it's been 7 years, going on 8. And I'm just really, really lucky that I am here at this school. I love it so much, and the kids are great. We are also what is called a picture-based learning school. It is something new that has just started. It is an American company, but we do have several of those big picture learning schools. That's on the next slide there, if you would like to bring that up, please, for everybody. we focus on putting the students at the center of everything that we do and making authentic learning. So instead of myself and my teaching partner being at the front of the school, front of the classroom every single day, we do a lot of inquiry and project based and then throw in curricular outcomes and lessons through what we call workshops. But we're also very heavy on taking students outside of the school because we wholeheartedly believe that there is so much to learn outside of, the four walls of our classroom. So we go on a lot of leaving to learns, which are field trips. Friday, we are actually going out to Siigwan First Nation, which is about an hour and 43 minutes. And we're going to be finishing up our Lake Winnipeg inquiry project, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And we're going to get some fish teaching, some water teachings, land teachings, and we're just going to have a really awesome time. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to briefly introduce myself, and I'm going to use those 4 questions that were presented by the late Maurice Sinclair. So who am I? I am an Indigenous Métis woman from here on Treaty 1 territory. That's on the next slide. I am a teacher, a daughter, a sister, a dog auntie, a friend, a North Ender, an ally, an education rebel, and a lifelong learner. I am Métis, Cree, Nishnawbe, Dakota, and Dene. I grew up knowing that I am an Indigenous person, but I didn't know exactly what that meant. I took a look at my grandpa and I knew we were Indigenous. But because of his mother, going to residential school, I didn't know anything about our culture and where we come from. There was no language, there was no teachings passed down. But as I get older and I think back to conversations I've had with my grandpa, who is no longer with us, when we were fishing on the banks of the Red River, there were cultural teachings there. I just was a young kid who just thought her grandfather was full of hot air and would rather just be trying to fish. But now at 42, I'm like, I should have paid attention to my grandpa a little bit more. Next slide, please. And one more. Where am I from? I am right here, Treaty 1 territory with ancestral connections to Sandy Bay First Nations, also the Métis communities of St. Rose de Lac, St. Francois Xavier, and St. Andrews. And I also have connections to the Dakota people of Minnesota, which we know as Minnesota, Kiowa, the Cherokee and Choctaw people of the South. And I know the Cherokee thing is like, that's the one that everyone goes for. I have documents to prove it. And I always say that because people always are like, you sure there? Yes, I do. These are my beautiful ancestors. The picture on your left, I've calculated it's between 125 and 130 years old. And I am so very lucky to have this picture. This is my 4 times great-grandfather, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit. And then in the middle, we have my great-grandparents, and all of in there is the residential school survivor. And to your right are my great-great-grandparents, William and Suzanne. And Suzanne was a traditional Indigenous medicine woman who was the boss, I've been told. And my papa would say, you never got out of control with her. She always laid down the law. And when she told you to come, you come. So I would have loved to have met her. Next slide, please. And why am I here? I love teaching. I love being able to give back to my community. I love being able to meet every single student that walks through our doors. And, I always say my job as a teacher, but my students are my teachers. And I have always learned something from them every day. And the relationships that we build is just fantastic. And then the final question on the next slide, where am I going? I wholeheartedly believe that is up to my ancestors and Creator. I'm just here walking that road as best as I can. Next slide, please. So why am I doing this all? What is my purpose? I want our students to be able to understand that they are land defenders, that they come from a long line of people who have defended and continue to defend this land and to make it a better place for all of us to learn. And when I was 8 years old, that is when what everyone knows as the Oka crisis was happening. I was 8 and I watched it on the news and I understood that. And this picture has always been ingrained in my mind. And then we have Autumn Pelche and our relatives in Standing Rock and Wissawetton. And our students know that in some eyes we're seen as troublemakers because we are vocal about being land defenders. And so our students here can tell you that they are land defenders and they are working their way, and they're just beginners, but they're going to reclaim that title that their ancestors have worked so incredible hard for. And I never thought that I was a land defender, but I certainly am. And I know I have a lot of work to do. Next slide, please. So this is the land defender in my family, my 4 times great-grandfather, Jean-Baptiste Spence Sr. His spirit name is Awepene Washkijak. And I asked our Cree teacher a couple of years ago what that meant, and he said it was Old Cree, and it roughly translates to man who walks backwards into the wind, which is interesting because I've been told by several elders that I walk backwards into a circle. And so I'm just like, well, I'm just like my grandfather. I walk backwards into the wind. He was a land defender. He was voted in the very first elections in Sandy Bay as a councillor along with his son, my 3 times great-grandfather. And they petitioned the Canadian government to actually move Sandy Bay First Nation further inward because they were located right on the shore of Lake Manitoba. And every year it flooded. And every year they had a challenge just surviving. And so they petitioned the government 3 times. And the first 2 times they were basically met with, nope, we're putting you there, that's where you're staying. And then the 3rd time they were like, okay, fine, you want to move, we'll let you move. And they signed treaty dissolution papers without noticing it. And those words were in a letter that they were troubled Indians and troublemakers, and we need to lead by example as a country and show people you can't mess with us. And I also have a letter in my possession that was written by a gentleman who met my grandfather and asked him about what had happened. And he said, there's nothing I can do about it, but I'm free and I don't have to answer to a white man anymore. I can live my life how I want to be, and I'm actually happy. The letter is very sad, but it really humbled me that in order for him to do what he wanted to do, there was a consequence, and he was okay with that. And he was okay with being a troublemaker. And so I am. So I hope I am walking his legacy in a good way. Next slide, please. So again, everything starts with the land, and that is what we do here in our class. Next slide. We asked our students before we start, how do you talk to the land? If you could talk to the land, what would you say? What do you think the land would say to you? And then what would it actually say to you? And so the students really had to think about those last 2 questions. And we had one student answer the last questions saying, I think the land would kick my butt for not treating it well. And that was pretty powerful because he meant it with such honesty. And now he's listening and he's learning and he's coming out on our Leaving to Learns and he's participating in cultural activities a little bit more. So I ask that you ask the youth that you work with these questions too, and see what they come up with. Next slide. Oh, I don't know why that one was in there again. I do apologize. So project-based learning is Indigenous education. I've been able to make those connections over the last couple of months. And if we go to the next slide there, this is how I was able to make those connections. So this infographic here comes from a book by Kim Anderson called A Recognition of Being Reconstructive Native Womanhood. It's a really fantastic book. I highly recommend it whenever I meet educators from all walks of life. I always recommend this book. So the way it was taught to me is the kids are always in the center. The child is always in the center, surrounded by your family, by your community, by your nation. And that could be, you know, your aunties and your uncles, and even those aunties and uncles that aren't blood related, but we know are our aunties and uncles. And then by creation, and how we've explained it to our students is it's not just creator. It is everything on that land. It's the air that you breathe. It's the ground that you touch in between your toes. It's the trees. It's the plants. It's the insects. It's all of those animals, everything in creation. And on the right is from our Mama Tawissa and the Wonder That You Are Born With. It's an Indigenous education policy framework that was developed here with the guidance of Indigenous educators and elders and knowledge keepers. And so when you take a look at the graphic on the left and then the information on the right, you can see that it is very much entwined. So it's authentic involvement. It's putting students at the center. It's understanding worldviews, values, identities, traditions, contemporary lifestyles, and it's also inclusive and culturally safe environment. We work really hard to make sure that we have all of that here at this school. And we understand that we have students that might not even be ready to sit in a pipe ceremony because they don't know how. They've lost that connection. And that's okay. And so when I look at the project-based learning that we have done this without even truly understanding, because in conversations that I've had with non-Indigenous educators, they think Indigenous education is a box that you can check. They, for some reason, think it's teepees and bannock, which is fine. I mean, we have teepee teachings, and right now we have kids outside who are working with other kids in our division, putting out a teepee just right outside here, my window. But it's so much more than that. And it's not a box that you can check. And so when we do these projects, students, they're in that center. They have control and they have choice. And then they're surrounded by their school family, the supports of their own family, our community, their communities, their nation, and by creation as well. Next slide, please. And these are just other pieces that I have pulled from different areas too, that when I was examining the work that we do here, especially with the project-based and inquiry-based learning, we follow those 4 R's of Indigenous guiding principles: respect, relationship, reciprocity, responsibility, relevance, representation. I was just having a conversation with our principal this afternoon because we have to do teacher learning plans in our division. And I have 6 whole pages of reflection of this whole last year using those 6 headers. And it's really been a journey for us. And our students have that respect and that relationship with the land now. And for those who have been finding it challenging, they're slowly getting there, but they have that respect and the relationship. We give back. We go out into the community. After they have learned something here, we go out and we share it. They have a responsibility to continue with that knowledge and sharing it. And it's relevant. The treaties are relevant to what they're learning. The curriculum is very westernized, but they see themselves in those teachings when it comes to natural resource extraction. And so how we really hooked them with that is, we've given students maps and we tell them, okay, put Winnipeg and Brandon and Lake Winnipeg and Lake Manitoba on the map. But we took it a step further and we asked students to put their home communities on the map. So we had a list going in our class and then we all mapped it. And what they realized is that, one, even though their communities might be like 100 kilometers away or so, they're still very close. And 2, their communities are greatly impacted by Manitoba Hydro and natural resource extraction. And so they also see there's representation in their curriculum and in their projects. Right now, if I had the ability to pan my camera, it is a disaster in my classroom, but a good one, because they're working on an ELA project, building a city that is sustainable and for everybody. And in that representation, they're including Indigenous practices and ways of life and living. We have a student who has a big powwow stadium in the center of her project. They have many multiple water sources. They have a teaching center. They have a medicine garden. And also the other thing is language integration. They know that they're going to have to translate those pieces into their project. Next slide, please. And also, too, Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and living is sustainability. I've had this conversation with our wonderful knowledge keeper and cultural teacher, Connie Westbuck. Indigenous people, our people, have been sustainable for a very long time. We took care of this earth. We knew how to take care of it. We knew how to maintain everything. We took what we needed. We used what we needed. There was no such thing as overconsumption. We shared it. And so as we have been doing our Manitoba and Hydro and Lake Winnipeg Inquiry Project, they understand that. And just by having conversations with elders and First Nations community members and leaders, they get that now, that practices have been sustainable. But there has been a removal of that because of colonization and practices and policies that were put in place. And so, you know, we had a student who was like, come to think of it, like, we don't have a fishing community anymore. And that's what it was about. I'd hear stories about fishing, and now we don't do that. And it's because they're located along the Nelson River, where Manitoba Hydro has several generation stations, and lands flooded communities and took away those ways of being, living, the sustainability piece. So it's really been interesting and just beautiful to see how our students are making these connections. Next slide, please. So how did it get started? And then the other slide, the next one. So before we started Big Picture Learning and Inquiry-Based Learning, I was teaching a course called Grade 11 Topics in Science, where really you could talk about anything in science. And I really wanted to focus it more on Indigenous ways of knowing and being and living. So while I was in Minneapolis, I sat down at a table and just wrote this whole piece out. And we learned about medicines. We went medicine picking. Students put together their own medicine bundles. They got those teachings. They sat with Connie, our cultural teacher. We've looked at food and food sources. They learned about Three Sisters, and they made Three Sisters soup. And we just had a really good time making the connection between those ways of knowing, being, and living and science. And then all of a sudden, this fell into our lap. So in 2023, the city of Winnipeg had to close down one of the three main bridges here in the North End because it was over 121 years old and it was falling apart, and it could no longer sustain any kind of traffic, vehicular or pedestrian. And so now we have Salter Bridge. We have Salter Bridge right here, which goes north-south. All these bridges goes north-south. And then a while over, we have the McPhillips underpass. And so we had a student, and I'll never forget him, Ben. Really great kid. Challenged me on everything I taught, every kind of notion that I put out there. He stood up and said, "Why do people hate us so much?" And I said, "Can you explain that a little bit more?" And he says, "Well, I see it in one of two ways. First and foremost, why do people hate us as Indigenous people? The city of Winnipeg knows that the North End is heavily populated by Indigenous people, and yet they decide without a plan to shut this bridge down, and we know that there's not going to be a bridge being built. And two, like this bridge is a vital connection between the North End and Central Winnipeg and the West End. So he took it upon himself, after this bridge closed, to see how long it would take him to get from Dufferin and Arlington to Logan and Arlington, which you'll see, which is right in this picture. It took him almost 2 hours to walk, whereas it would have taken him 10 minutes to get across. And so that led to our inquiry project. How is a bridge more than just a vessel for transporting vehicles? So what we did is we looked at how the North End is notoriously known as a food desert. We have Sobeys Cash and Carry at the end of the Arlington Bridge. And then if you want another grocery store, you have to go just about 5 minutes up McGregor to Mountain where there's a Safeway. That's it. We have a Dollarama, and then we have little convenience stores that charge a ridiculous amount of money for food. We put it into a Google Excel spreadsheet, and students looked at where you could get food in the North End. We are still very short on it. It's just a lot of mom and pop shops. There's bakeries and small restaurants, but students were able to see the need for one, better transportation, because now these people have to go all the way around to get to Sobeys Cash and Carry, where it was only like 10 minutes, maybe longer in the wintertime, but we need to have more of that. And so that's where this whole inquiry started for us. Then we got told that I'm no longer teaching that course second semester, and it moved now into our pilot project for big picture learning, where we were going to be with the grade 9s all second semester, and it moved into, we took this and it moved into our new inquiry. So we went from a bridge, and if you could go to the next slide, please, to this, food insecurity in the North End. And our inquiry question was, how can we design and maintain a community garden that meets diverse needs and interests of all participants while promoting sustainability, community engagement, and incorporating Indigenous ways of knowing? So we took a look at the grade 11 project that was done, and then we had a think tank in our classroom and say, what could we do to address food insecurity, knowing that, yes, we need more grocery stores, but we don't have money and we don't have land. We just can't do it. And a student said, well, why don't we put out a garden? We already have a box out there that's collecting weeds. So we cleaned it up. There's an organization called Seed Next Door that helps with the community. They started their community garden. So we decided to do 3 sisters. And we had 2 types of squash, we had beans, and we had corn. Unfortunately, Sister Bean did not make it. She was choked out by the abundance of squash. We had a lot of squash, a lot. And we only had 4 cobs of corn, but that's okay. We updated the community of the progress of the garden throughout the summer, and it was well taken care of. In the North End, we have a problem with vandalism and community gardens. We had no vandalism. And people came and took vegetables. We also had a tomato plant. There's the second picture there is actually a tomato plant that one of the teachers planted the year before. And then in September, when he was cleaning it for the winter, he just left the tomatoes. So when we got our hands on it this time last year, we noticed there was this plant, and we're like, what the heck is this? Is this a weed? And we're like, nah, you know what? Don't touch it. It was 2 tomato plants, and it grew crazy. And so we, along with our 3 sisters, we had tomatoes, and it was very well received. We're actually going to be starting our seeding process very shortly, so that we're going to do a root vegetable garden, and we're also going to do a herb garden as well. And we're going to also be starting a medicine garden as well, where community members will have access to traditional medicines that they'll be able to take and use. Next slide, please. And that led us into now this year's big project, Water is Life. And so my teaching partner and I, we weren't quite sure where we were going to go. We were having troubles trying to figure out just kind of what we were going to do. And then in September, the Southern Chiefs organization announced that they were taking the province of Manitoba and Manitoba Hydro to court for willfully and knowingly killing Lake Manitoba. And they want the lake to have recognition under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms as a living entity. And so we presented that to our students, and they're like, yeah, water is life. They have these teachings. They know all about it. And so our inquiry project this whole entire year was how can we use both scientific and Indigenous knowledge to improve the ecological health of Lake Winnipeg? And that covered both our grade 10 science and geography units because they mesh so well together. So we were able to make it cross-curricular and do this all year round. And they were able to hit those outcomes that were both, because it takes we have way too many curricular outcomes for those, I'll admit it. But we were able to get to a lot. And they had a great time learning this. So the picture that you see is from October. Our students went out to Gimli, Manitoba. We rented buses and up we went. We had a beautiful pipe ceremony on the shore, and we received water teachings from Connie. And then we had a hot dog roast on the beach. And then we collected our lake water so that we could come back and take a look at it in our microscopes. We also offered tobacco because we know that is very important. That's the relationship that we're having. And then they just got to hang out in Gimli there along the beach and have fun. And it was just so wonderful to see kids be kids. And a lot of them just sat along that shore and just watched the waves come in. And so what have we done with that? We have done workshops. If you can go to the next slide, please. We came back and we looked at those samples underneath our microscope. There's another picture of them taking samples. We have partnered with grade 11 and 12 students. So this is like really a grade 10, 11, and 12 project. And then we're wrapping it up this week at Siigwan. So we went to Gimli, which is on the west shore of Lake Winnipeg. Now we're going to Siigwan, which is on the bottom east side of Lake Winnipeg. And we're going to be meeting with some knowledge keepers who live there. They've invited us out. They think what we're doing is absolutely fantastic with understanding. And we're going to get teachings. 1 second. Sorry, we just had an announcement. So we're going Friday and we're just going to have a really great time. And one of the gentlemen there that's going to be helping out has actually fishing, and we're going to have some fish pulled out from Lake Winnipeg. And so the students are really, really excited to wrap that up as their projects. So we've touched on those ways of being and knowing, not just from the tiny knowledge that I have, but we've tapped into community members. Our Cree teacher is from Grand Rapids, where there's a hydro generation station, and she was able to come in here and talk to our students and share what it was like living, the good and the bad. They've investigated and listened to Indigenous members who live in those communities where all of those generation stations are to get perspectives. And so now, how are we going to wrap this up aside from our trip to Siigwan? So if you go to the next slide, we are going to be doing a really cool art project. It's called The Fabric of Our Identity. So they're going to get just like a little square of fabric, and they're going to put words, or they're going to draw whatever they have learned from our inquiry project. And then we're going to shape it into Lake Winnipeg, and it's going to be a living visual here in our school so that students can see it. And so it's touched on that curiosity of a student. It focuses on what they wanted to learn, because they had a lot of questions. And, you know, when they were like, well, Michelle, Tyler, what is this? Tyler and I, we looked into it. We reached out to community members, to elders, to knowledge keepers to make sure we had that information. And then if we didn't have that, we just say, well, that's a tobacco question that we have to put tobacco down. And hopefully, you know, Creator can help us with that question. And so it's been really, really cool to see students just thriving with this inquiry project. And they're just, like I said, they're really psyched to be going out to Siigwan this weekend on Friday to learn more and to wrap it up, because they had a really good time, and they're able to ask really good questions. Some of them actually want to write letters to the province of Manitoba and to Manitoba Hydro and really press, like, you need to do better. You know, yes, we have electricity because of this, but you're killing our lake. They looked at the scientific as well. So they looked at the chemicals that are in there. We've learned about how much chemicals are in there. We've looked at numbers, data sets from sample sites of the phosphorus coming into the lake. So we've really dug at the surface of it. And then when they go to grade 11 and 12, the 11 and 12 advisors are going to delve a little more deeper into that. So it's not just going to stop here. It's going to continue. Next slide, please. So here's what we've done with workshops. Just show you a little bit about that. We've done a lot of mind maps, a lot of mapping, my very terrible map of this country. I am not Picasso, and they're okay with that. We looked at an ecosystem of the North End just to get them interested. So we do workshops, just little classes here and there with as much information as we can. Next slide. And here's how we take it outside the classroom. So we've been to the Leaf. It's a really cool building at the Assiniboine Park Zoo, where it's a botanical garden. They learn how to put up a teepee. The grade 9s are teepee keepers. Their knowledge, they learn about that, and then they become keepers of that teepee. And so the grade 10s now have that knowledge, and we go out into the community. We actually just did a 3-day workshop with another school teaching the young ones how to do that. We've been to the Manitoba Hydro Museum and learned about their history here in the province. We've gone to the Canadian Museum for Human Rights and learned about human rights in the coolest way through music. And then we have taken them to the legislative building here. And I put this picture in it because it was really impactful to me that day and really significant. 95% of our students identify as Indigenous. And when we met with Minister Nahani Fontaine, she said to them, this building wasn't built for you. It was built for white people, men, who ruled inside of here. And now we have Wab Canoe, we have Nahani Fontaine, we have Bernadette Smith. And it's just, they really liked walking into that building and into their offices and seeing themselves in there. Not just by the people that are there representing, but there were star blankets, there's pipes, there's medicine in a building that was never meant for them. And so that picture is just, to me, so significant. And I have a copy here in my classroom, and they look at it from time to time because there is that huge significant piece of there. Next slide. Here's a project that a student has done. So this is last year when she took it from the Canadian Human Rights Museum after we went. She was like, how can art help tell a story of injustices? So she found an artist from South Korea who did that through art, and she recreated a piece, and that's one of them that she did. And she did a really fabulous job. She's actually now doing, because we learned about Lake Winnipeg, she is actually doing a project on fast fashion. If I try to pan my camera over to her where she sits, there are 4 bags of clothing underneath the table because she is doing a fast fashion project where she's taking her clothes and repurposing it. In the science lab, she has a sweater in a basket of dye, and we've been going down to our sewing lab, and because she knows that there's clothes in Lake Winnipeg, there's different types of waste in there, and so she was really inspired by what we've been doing in this class, and now she's doing this, and she's going to have a mini fashion show, and so we're really super jazzed about what she's doing because she's been so excited. Next slide. So just to recap, it's all about pedagogy over content. Next slide, please. Curiosity. We tap into their curiosity. And what's really cool is some of their inquiry projects, it's just projects that they just want to do without our direction. So we had one student last year do a project on Sonic the Hedgehog and on dinosaurs, and they absolutely loved it. Now this year, we're really seeing them tap into what we have been doing. So we have a student who is going to be meeting with David Alexander Robertson next week to interview him because she's doing a project on novelists, and it's because she read a book by Wabageshing Rice. That's one of our novels for English language arts. We have another student who's doing graffiti art. How can we take graffiti in the neighborhood and make it more impactful so where people can do graffiti art, but it's meaningful? So it's really, really great to see their curiosities just expand. Next slide. engagement. We have seen that, and we are so excited for next year when we get a new group of students. So the grade 9s now are going to be our grade 10s, and then we get a new bunch of grade 9s. And so we're hoping that we're able to spark that curiosity through pedagogy and get the engagement. We've been talking to the grade 9s, and they're some of them are jazzed, and some of them are like, not too sure, but we'll get that in September. Next slide. One student at a time. We don't like to be very forceful here. And so if a student needs to take time, they have that. However they learn, however they want to present how they learn, how they demonstrate is also things. So it's one student at a time. Next slide, please. Making mistakes, learning from them, trying again. I always tell students that if we're allowed to take our driver's road test multiple times, why can't they take a math test until they understand they're able to demonstrate that mastery of the content? And so we encourage them to make mistakes. We encourage them to learn from them and to try again. And that has been a beautiful process for here in this class. And the next slide, please. So that's it for my presentation. Here are just some academic journals and books that I really have enjoyed reading over the last little while and learning more so I could implement into my practice. So if that's going to be available to you, that's awesome. But also those documents, I will make sure that you get copies, like digital copies of, because the files were quite large and our server here at the school wasn't allowing us to send it. So I'll make sure that you get those copies so you can see the unit plan process that we have and those big picture learning questions. And that's it for my presentation. Ekosane,